This national championship rematch from last year looks a lot different. Will the result of this game this time around be as different as the rosters for both of these teams in 2024? Will it result in a Washington Husky upset?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
So much has changed with players on the field. So much has changed with coaches on the sidelines with both of these two teams. It's kind of hard to believe that these two teams were playing for the ultimate prize in college football at the end of last season, 9 months ago. But yet here we are. Combined last year, when all was said and done between these two teams, they had a combined one loss. One loss. And that one loss was Washington's loss to Michigan in the national championship game. Now, as we get into the first week of October, these two teams have a combined 3 losses. But this is going to be a really good football game. I think there are paths to victory, certainly, for both the maize and blue and the purple and gold in this particular matchup. Now, when we moved to an 18-team Big Ten, there was a lot put into maybe some travel concerns. How would that help some teams? How would that hurt some teams going across the country in some of these matchups? Now, one stat that really stands out, I'm sure Michigan fans have heard this one already, but Michigan has lost their last 5 trips out to the West Coast in the regular season. The first of those 5, 1983, when these Washington Huskies beat Michigan at the greatest setting in college football, 25-24, but take it with a grain of salt. The last time Michigan went to the West Coast in the regular season was in 2003 when they lost by 4, 31-27 at Autzen Stadium to the Oregon Ducks. So it's been a minute. 2021, these two teams met with Washington coming to the Big House in the regular season, and the Wolverines were able to handle business on that particular day. So we'll see how the travel this time around affects the Michigan Wolverines. It is going to be a great atmosphere. Night game in Seattle on Montlake, the greatest setting in college football. This is what college football and this is what the Big Ten is all about, to get these types of games, these types of environment in prime time on one of the biggest stages of the particular week. All right, let's dive into this matchup and let's start to break down some of the things that could go right, some of the things that could go wrong for these two prospective teams. Let's start first with Will Rogers. Will Rogers is one of the best quarterbacks right now in the Big Ten Conference. He's playing comfortable, and I think he's playing very confidently in this Jedd Fisch and Brendan Carroll offense so far this season. He is 3rd in the Big Ten in passing yards, 10 touchdowns, and a goose egg for interceptions. 0 INTs so far this season for Will Rogers. That's key, is his ability to not only be comfortable, not only to be confident, but also protect the football. He is the only current starting quarterback in the Big Ten to have not thrown an interception so far this season. I think that goes a long way to the success that Washington has been able to achieve. Now, I think that they still want to be able to jump up a little bit more. Those losses to Washington State, those losses to Rutgers, this was a Washington offense that was not able to finish drives. More on that as this preview really progresses. He has a nearly 75% completion rate, sitting at 74.8. It's second behind only Dylan Gabriel, who's over 80% completion rate so far this season, which you put all of this together, that completion percentage and not turning the football over, it's impressive, but he's also thrown the 4th most passes in the Big Ten so far. So there's been opportunities maybe for defenses to get in the way and force the turnovers. There's been opportunities for him to not be as accurate and efficient throwing the football and getting that higher completion percentage, but he's been able to work really well in this offense, I think, because of what the Huskies also have on the perimeter. Statistically, maybe not talent-wise, but statistically, they have the best wide receiver duo in the Big Ten. Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson are 2nd and 3rd, respectively, in the Big Ten in receiving yards so far this season. They have combined for 813 yards and 8 scores. When you have those types of guys, that'll certainly help you out if you're Will Rogers right now. Now, how does that all tie together to this particular game against Michigan? Michigan secondary, when they have played Power 4 competition, when they have played good competition, they haven't exactly been great against the pass. Check it. Quinn Ewers, Texas. Miller Moss, USC. Max Brosmer, Minnesota. When they played those 3 quarterbacks, when they played those 3 teams, they gave up on average 262 yards against the pass. I know there's Will Johnson, and I know he's one of the best corners in college football. He's going to be back from injury this week, and I think that's going to be a big factor. More on that there in just a minute. But if you look at the rest of the secondary, I think there's openings for Washington to be able to move the football down the field. You got to think that Will Johnson is going to be matched up against Washington's best target, that being Denzel Boston. I'm curious as to maybe what happens on the other side of this defense and the other side of this Washington Huskies passing attack. I mentioned Giles Jackson. You also got to talk about Jeremiah Hunter, who's having a good season. I think spreading the football around is going to be a key to success for Washington, certainly in this particular game. Michigan is 103rd in the country against the pass this season. So there are going to be opportunities. There are going to be openings for Washington, certainly, to be able to move the football in this game. All of that being considered, you look to the other side. Michigan is going to need to have a similar performance like they did against USC in terms of getting pressure on the passer. When you look at this Washington offensive line, I know they didn't give up any sacks or TFLs against Rutgers. I think that's more of a Rutgers thing and plays into mostly what they've done this year and last year, and maybe doesn't speak as much to the Washington offensive line. Like you look at back of that game against Northwestern, this is a Husky O-line that gave up 3 sacks in the battle of the purple teams in that specific matchup. I think Michigan can get after it. I think Michigan can disrupt what Will Rogers and this offense wants to do, disrupt the timing, and they are going to need to be able to do that. So that's going to be the matchup within the matchup, right? When we talk about Washington's ability to throw the football down the field, and then you look at this matchup up front, I think Michigan has a pretty sizable advantage with their defensive line against Washington's offensive line. If they're not able to get pressure on the Huskies in this particular game, I think Washington could have a really good day moving the football up and down the field. So I think that's the key caveat, is what's going to happen in the trenches if Washington can keep the Wolverine pass rush at bay. I want to see Washington, because of that, I want to see Washington get rid of the football quickly. Get me some quick passing concepts to try to neutralize this pass rush a little bit. Try to keep them on the field for longer. I'll kind of have another point on maybe the time of possession here in just a little bit throughout this preview as well. Michigan wants to smash in Seattle, right? I think that's what they want to do. Smash is their mantra, of course, that Sharon Moore has coined, and how physical that they want to be at the line of scrimmage. And they need to win the battle up front. This is, I think, a little bit of an underrated Washington defensive line. I think that this is a solid unit up front for the Huskies. I think Steve Belichick overall has done a pretty solid job with this Washington defense that didn't return a lot of production coming back this season. If you're Michigan, and of course we know what they need to do, they need to be able to run the football in this specific game. You need to establish that identity early on. Because the worst thing I think that can happen for the Wolverines is for Washington to stack up on you, get you into third down, 3 and outs, get you off the field. And then if Washington can drive the football down the field, they take a 10-point lead middle of the second quarter, a 2-possession lead maybe into the second half. Michigan is not built for that. Michigan is not built to come from behind. That's why Michigan needs to be able to establish the run and their physicality early on in this matchup. Continue to wear down the Washington Huskies as this game goes on. I've talked about patience with this Michigan run game as well. They need to have patience. They need to get to that point late in the second half where this game is still close and Michigan is still investing in the run game, and eventually the dam breaks. And maybe they get those big explosive runs that we saw against USC when maybe the Trojans got a little bit tired of defending run after run after run after run. But the key to be in that situation is to be able to keep this game close. The defense, of course, needs to do their part, but this is a Michigan team that needs to be methodical and needs to continue to keep on moving the football little by little and not get 3 and outs. You need to sustain drives. You need to keep the chains moving. Even if it results in a punt, even if it results in a field goal, you can't have drives that get stalled right away and allow your defense then to get worn down being on the field a little bit longer against this very good Washington offense as well. I think this is going to be the battle of the backs, part two. I think who plays well at the running back position maybe could swing this one, certainly one way or another. Last week, it was Jonah Coleman against Kyle Monangai. Coleman had another really good day for the Huskies. These are two of the better running back talents in the entire Big Ten Conference. And if you're into great running backs, I think you're certainly going to have a treat when you watch this game on Saturday night. But I want to say this. When I look at Washington's offensive line, which we talked about that matchup against the Michigan pass rush, but when I look at Washington's offensive line and I see Mason Graham on the other side, I see Kenneth Grant on the other side, I think it's going to be really hard for Washington to run the football up the middle. I just don't know how good of a day Jonah Coleman is going to have running the football. I think that they're going to be able to need to throw to run in this game. And I think that Washington is going to need some balance, right, in this particular game. So Michigan just can't pin their ears back for this entire game and get pressure on Will Rogers. So they need to get that passing game going early. I think that there are certainly openings for this pass game to get it going early to have Washington to be able to have success. But when it comes to protecting Will Rogers, when it comes to paving a way for Jonah Coleman up the middle, I just don't know. I just don't know if Washington is going to be ultra successful in those two ways. So they need to find other ways to get offensive production. And man, look, they need to be able to finish drives. You look at those last two, you look at the two losses against Washington State and Rutgers, they were in position to win those games. Like, they are so close right now to being 5-0. So close to being 5-0. Couldn't make field goals against Rutgers. Couldn't punch it in at the end of that game at Lumen Field in Seattle when they lost to Washington State there late on that fourth down call where they were stymied and they were stopped and they were blown off the football. If Washington can find a way to finish drives, I feel confident that the Huskies could come out of here with a win over the Wolverines, but so far, I haven't seen that from this Washington Huskies team. It's prediction time, and I'm not ultra confident in this, folks. I'm not. I could see this one going so many different ways, but I've got Michigan coming out with a close victory, 23-20 over the Washington Huskies. I think the Michigan defensive line, at the very least, is going to have a good day against Washington. I think that they can get pressure on Will Rogers in this game. I think that they can get this Washington pass game out of rhythm. But then again, folks, I also think Washington can have a pretty good day throwing the football. Like I just said, it's going to come down to the Huskies' ability to finish drives. In some of these bigger games this year for the Huskies, I just haven't seen them consistently be able to finish drives. So I'm not ultra confident when you face a defense like Michigan, which is the best defense that Washington will have faced so far this season, that they're going to be able to do that. But I am more than welcomed to the purple and gold of the folks in Seattle proving me wrong on that specific front. I think Michigan's offense does barely enough, right? I've only got them scoring 2 touchdowns in this particular game. I talked about them sustaining drives. I think that they're going to be able to sustain drives enough against the Steve Belichick defense. I got them scoring 2 touchdowns, kicking a handful of field goals in this particular matchups as well. I think having Will Johnson back is going to help a lot. I think it's going to help a lot in the one-on-one matchup against Denzel Boston. They just need the rest of their secondary to play well against this Washington defense as well. You combine Will Johnson with this pass rush, I think that's enough for Michigan to be able to get a close, hard-fought, walk-off win against the Washington Huskies on Big Ten Saturday night. I want to hear what you guys think. I am not confident really in this pick at all. If I picked Washington, I would not be confident in that pick at all. I want to hear all of your score predictions in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.